The reality is that there isn't a whole lot of drug education. My drug education as a kid was just say no. I was growing up in the height of the Nancy Reagan, just don't do it. Just abstinence from everything, and it worked actually for me. I'll be honest. Like the idea of taking something like LSD or any other psychedelic that was going to make me crazy scared the crap out of me. I didn't want to do that. Like my mind was all I knew, and that was all I had, and I wanted to keep that going. And so what we do with Zendo Project is we provide a safe space and peer support. Again, a lot of these folks are psychiatrists, therapists, doctors, nurses who have a deeper arc. But when they're coming to this place, they hang their professional hat on the hook at the door and come in just to be peer support. To, again, back to this place of reinforcing that I think the innate ability of humans is to heal themselves. And so we're just helping folks to have their process to go where and do what they need to feel complete with their own emotional release and integration.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Fractal Friends, and I'm your host, Duncan Autry. Welcome to the podcast where we explore our self-similarity across our diversity. We all have a role to play in the whole, and the goal of this show is to interview people with interesting perspectives and who play interesting roles in the world, and to see what we can learn from them and what we can learn from each other. This episode is a conversational interview with Ryan Beauregard. Ryan is the founder of We Share Earth, an organization committed to transforming grief and garbage into growth and gardens. And in this conversation, we learn about his passion to support the creation of a sustainable society and culture. And we talk about how we can do that by deepening our relationship with nature, learning what we can from it, and then getting out of its way. Ryan is also the manager of the Zendo Project. The Zendo Project is part of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Science. MAPS is a 501c3 nonprofit research organization that develops the legal and cultural contexts to help people benefit from the careful uses of psychedelics. The Zendo Project that Ryan manages is a peer support network that's designed to help people prevent and transform difficult experiences that sometimes occur when someone is in a non-ordinary state of consciousness. They provide a safe space at large festivals where volunteers are prepared to help and sit with people as they go through the difficult and often transformative experiences that happen when they have maybe taken psychedelics in a context that they weren't planning on. Before we start, though, I want to make a disclaimer. In this episode, we talk about how psychedelics are undergoing U.S. government FDA studies for their potential to help people with trauma. We talk about how the healing potential of psychedelics is being increasingly discussed in the mainstream media and how research is advancing around that. Nonetheless, we need to say that these substances are illegal still. And they are very risky, and they can be easily used in ways that are inappropriate and dangerous. And neither Ryan nor I are medical doctors. We are not experts. We are not the FDA. We are not recommending, nor are we encouraging anyone to consume psychedelics or any of the substances that we discuss in this show. If you would like information, though, if you would like to learn more about the Zendo Project or MAPS, about people who are working with those who may have taken psychedelics more than they were expecting, or for information how to support people in those situations, or if you would like to learn about the work that people are doing to advance psychedelics for its medicinal uses, I will be including links for the Zendo Project and for MAPS on the Fractal Friends website, and that's fractalfriends.us. And as long as I'm making disclaimers, I feel like I should warn the tender U.S. American audience that there is a Marxist critique of capitalism in this episode. And I include this because I think it's a good perspective for us to pay attention to. Don't be scared. It's just philosophy. If you're interested in learning more about Marx and his detractors from a neutral perspective, I'm including a couple links to episodes of the Philosophize This podcast. You can find those in the show notes, which are again at fractalfriends.us. Okay, enough with the disclaimers. Now back to the interview with Ryan Beauregard. This conversation covers a lot of ground. We talk about the ecological crisis. We talk about economics. We talk about spirituality. And we talk about the current resurgence of research into the role of psychedelics as medicine and the implications of growing recreational culture in the world. But the theme that holds this whole conversation together is the power of self-healing. Each of us has the capacity to heal ourselves and to solve our own problems. And this is also true of nature. The world, including all of us, has the capacity to heal itself. And so how can we create space for this healing to happen? I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ryan Beauregard as much as we enjoyed making it. Thank you very much for listening to Fractal Friends. Have a good day. Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today.
Hi, Duncan. Great to be here. I enjoy talking with you. It's in all of our conversations, I've felt a great connection and a depth of conversation. So I'm happy we're doing it in this new format.
Totally. No, it was really great to be like in great conversation and then be like, hey, I'll get on your podcast too. Like, let's do it. All right, cool. And I'm also just really excited about the themes that you've worked on in your life. I think that they're really important. And I think that the work you're doing now is important. And I think that I just think that there's a lot to share here. And so I'm really looking forward to this. And as a way of getting started, I want to talk about sort of hear some more about like your background growing up. Sure. I know that like a really transformative thing was working with the Wilderness Youth Project, which is like part of the Wilderness Awareness School. And like your connection with nature and developing like a deep resonance with nature has been an important part of your life, it sounds like. And Absolutely. I'd love to hear like, just like, what does it mean for you to connect to nature? And what is it, why is that even useful? What are we doing?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. For me, I will say it came as a result. I mean, I certainly had a childhood of a lot of family trips to the beach or camping or things like that. So that was powerful. And for me, as soon as I got out of college, I spent 4 years in a cubicle, and I realized that was as far removed as I could be from really what was my true calling. And I found an environmental fair that I was a part of where the only thing environmental about it was this couple I met that were teaching wilderness survival to at-risk teens. And that got me excited. I realized that there was a deeper thing there that was a more of my life's calling. And so when I went and took my first course and saw the impact that it had with those kids, I realized that nature as a tool for learning and mentoring is, I feel like it's been part of our DNA for, hundreds of thousands of years. It's how we interact. We get pretty direct feedback from the natural world. And when we have the proper mentoring, I think it's been, again, ingrained in our DNA, but with one human to another, it can be really an effective tool for seeing our limitations as well as our ability to move through those limitations and really embrace our gifts.
Right, because it seems like when we recognize, well, first of all, of course, we came up with nature. We are nature. Right. We are, part of this whole thing. And then there's this been illusion that we've separated ourselves from nature, and it's kind of like the fall, I guess, whatever that is, and right. And it's not just that when we reconnect with nature, we're connecting with ourselves or the earth. But like we're actually this amazing tool for learning. Yeah. Like it's like, wow, here's a place that things are working really well, things are thriving, things are resilient and agile. And they have that, just stuff that's happening in nature that could really teach us a lot.
A lot, right? Yeah. Yeah, fully. The biomimicry approach, really looking at Wilderness Youth Project got me involved with a group called Quail Springs out in the Cuyama Desert, basically between Los Angeles and Bakersfield. And man, it was such a wake up to see that for all of the issues and problems we have in this world, there's already a lot of solutions. The biomimicry and, one of the concepts to just hit on that was that compost is naturally happening. It happens in the forest. It takes about 200 years, but as humans, with a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of water, a little bit of heat, we can make composting happen in about 2 months. Mm-hmm. And that is applicable to so many other of the issues that we're up against. And, again, I think it's not necessarily, I don't know how to better put it, but I'll put it this way. What I've seen with the disposable mindset that has been introduced in this last 50 or 100 years to humanity has really been problematic because nothing in this world is disposable in that same way where it doesn't just decompose. Our entire upbringing as humanity has been, you finish your food, you throw it out, and some animal or microbe takes care of the rest. And so now we've introduced plastic, and we still have that same kind of throwaway mentality, but there's really, as we know, no throwing away. There's no away when you just bury it in the earth and pretend that it's not there.
This image of like some people like, let's just blast it off the earth, and
right.
and I'm like, oh yeah, that's when we're off. That's when we've gone too far, right? Like,
exactly. Shoot it off into the sun. Yeah.
But I think I want to capture when you're mentioning like biomimicry and like just compost. We just know this is a system that works well, and it's something that's a system that's already existing.
Yeah.
And I was also looking at some like different videos you I think posted recently on a We Share Earth page, and there was like ideas about how to take little baby pieces of coral and get them to start growing,
right,
and then putting them back in the coral so that the coral will like start growing from a baby, and there was like other similar things like that, and it reminded me of this thing that I heard from this. One of the few videos there is of Alan Watts. And he had just gone to Los Angeles to meet with a bunch of thinkers and religious leaders and stuff like that. It was 1970, and they're like, we're at a environmental crisis. The world's going to end if we don't do something. And how do we get the world to care? But they realized that anything they tell the world to do just potentially is going to cause more problems, right? So like, let's get industrial farming going so we can feed everyone. Like, or let's do like, and they realized that kind of this consensus that the best things the human could do to help the planet heal itself was just to leave it alone, right?
The planet's going to be fine. It's
the planet is
the humans that need help,
it
right?
has this inherent ability to rebuild itself.
Yeah.
But then, of course, like not doing something's hard, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things is like that there's this illusion that we're separate.
Yeah.
So this idea that we have to do something for the environment, like we can't even do that until we realize that we are the environment, right? And so like, and that's like what he says, and that's like kind of the talk, and of course, very spiritual, far out things there. But when I was thinking about being like, how compost is not us doing something, we're like just gonna set up the conditions for the nature to fix itself, right? Same thing with like taking little pieces of coral and like helping them grow and then replanting them back. We're not gonna fix coral. We don't know how to do that.
Right.
Coral knows how to fix coral. And like, right? And so like, I just noticing like this theme of like, the world's kind of ready to take care of itself. And I think like, the metaphors we can find from nature, I think, to learn from is super powerful.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that we as humans are perfectly capable of healing ourselves. That's what our entire body and system is meant to do when given clean food and clean water and clean air and a great, not just environment outside, but a great social environment to feed our mind the right things that I believe can heal all these cancers and diseases and other things. And not to say that science doesn't have its place, because it absolutely does. I just, for me, and as I got into permaculture and then into natural building, one of the things that was really insightful was just the number of toxins that we put into a home, the off-gassing, the paints, all these things that there are and have been for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, these natural ways that we went about plastering and sealing using like things like lime even that can make an amazing waterproof sealant. And to really find where is that healthy balance of creating not just an environment that allows us to be fully fulfilled and to reach our potential as humanity, but a social condition as well, one that encourages us to fully be ourselves. And I think that we're finding a resurgence of that, of diversity, of the allowance of the individual to have an expression that doesn't necessarily impinge on the rights of others. Do no harm to self or others is a big piece of it. And it's an interesting movement, I'll say. I mean, I've been trying to filter media out for the last 10 or 15 years of my life, and that certainly makes a difference. But if I turn on Fox News or really anything else, it doesn't seem like humanity is doing so awesome. However, I think that you and I have seen in the different communities and festivals we've been a part of, people are doing some pretty awesome stuff. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of amazing thinkers and ingenuity happening out there. And I really do think that humanity and humans have the potential to turn this thing around. I think part of it, though, is we're looking for a need. I think there's something about taking an approach that has a bigger improvement of quality of life for all people, to meet needs. Equanimity rather than equality is the thing that I'm really been coming to lately.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I hear that one of the challenges that seems to be happening for humans is when they get so comfortable that they stop growing, like that healing process, or that ability for them to grow and heal and step into their full authentic self gets limited. And what is getting in that way is these like artificial comforts.
Right.
And these artificial comforts are literally coming at the cost of people doing almost slave labor to make things in other countries, you know, so we can have comfortable things.
Yeah.
And then that level of comfort is also kind of undermining this ability for those people to grow.
Yeah. You know, what I've really come to appreciate, and I got to work for Apple for like 3 years. I was a genius, which, you know, and I don't love that term, but, you know, I worked
like
at the
genius desk.
bar.
Yeah.
I'm not actually a genius. I'm not part of Mensa, but the idea that what I learned, I'll just say this, what I learned in my like 2 years at the Genius Bar was far exceeded any psychology education I got in school. I mean, you really talk about people in crisis. But the bigger takeaway from this was I was so frustrated because I was so happy with Apple and the products that they made. I was so frustrated with the innovation that consistently created an obsolescence for certain either connectors or plugs or things like that, where I would love to see us as humanity take a more open source approach to technology, so that when we have a computer, that's your computer for life.
Yeah.
You pass it down to your grandkids, and you can switch out processors and batteries and things as needed. But this idea that people have this proprietary thing, at one point I get that was a advantageous approach to the market, but come on, like what at what cost? Like how many iPhones and computers have just gone into the dump because of that? And really, like, the bigger thing is, like, can we pat ourselves on the back and call it a day around computers, TV, and phones? Be like, we made great
and cars
phones
and housing
and cars and all of it, and just be like,
everything that we build. Honestly, just recently heard someone really explain like this basic idea of Marxism is that, the observation of capitalism is that it has one really amazing thing that it does and one really horrible thing that it does. The amazing thing that it does is it motivates all of us to invent a bunch of awesome things. Like, we have now figured out the world where we all have enough computers and cars and housing for everyone on this planet. Already got it figured out. We know how to feed everyone.
Whatever color you want.
Whatever we got. So, and we also know how to make things of a quality that could be durable for decades. We know how to do that, right?
Whether or not we are actually applying that.
Well, that leads to the other problem of capitalism is that it makes profit over anything else.
Yes.
And that's the motivator. And so if you're going to keep on making more money, you have to keep on selling more things. And then that leads to like a separation of people who are spending and people who are getting the money. And then that gets bigger and bigger. And it's just like, all the proposal is like, let's all just embrace unemployment, stop building all this crazy stuff. We already have it. And then we just do enough work to just maintain. And then also, I think, just lean on the regenerative capacity of ourselves and the world. And I want to just like come back to that regenerative piece, because like we're in this like long-term healing process as we like go through time. Like, we've done a lot of hard things to the world, and as we're going to be healing, and we have to be healing ourselves, and we have to figure out how to forgive ourselves. And I think, in your We Share Earth, you talk about death and grief, and like also how do we like bring those things in. What was this thing you said about this video about bereavement? When people have grief, and it shows like, bereavement, when someone dies, like, it just affects your whole life. And as time goes away, it's not that fades, it's just that all the rest of your life just gets buried on top of it. And so then when that anniversary of that death comes up, or that something reminds you of that person, all of that grief is still there unless you've processed it. And I just am noticing, like, if we're going to like heal the earth, we got to like first accept how much damage we've done and find the peace with that. And then go, okay. Now what do we do, right? And so kind of that stepping into it. And
if I may, the piece on that I find really powerful, and Sarah Gale, the director of the Zendo Project, really kind of reinforced this for me, is, she really gives a lot of care and love for the earth. And she started as an environmental major in her undergrad, and realized as she did environmental work that the problem wasn't the environment, it was humanity. It was the mindset around it, that you can only do so much around environmental work. You really got to tackle the issue, which is the human condition, and how to better allow this thing called grief to exist, so that we can get past the blockages that are keeping us separate, not only from the natural world, but each other. And, two names I'd like to mention around grief are Martin Prechtel. He wrote an amazing book called Grief and Praise, as well as an audio lecture. And the other is, there's Malidoma Somé, but Sobonfu Somé, who passed about a year, maybe even 2 ago, God bless her, did a lot of powerful grief rituals. And I will say this, and I won't get into this whole avenue just yet, but there was some community that came together and did this ceremony. And in my experience to that point, it was the most psychedelic thing I'd ever done. And it involved zero substance. Mm-hmm. It involved a really powerful container around letting go of grief. And what that looked like was everything from tears to anger to yelling to just, pounding the floor. And there was a place for it. And it really created a community cohesion unlike any I'd ever seen. And it was like being in these powerful ayahuasca ceremonies where people are literally purging things they've been holding on to for a while. So for me, that was, it came a little bit before that, but it's what inspired the tagline behind We Share Earth, which is transforming grief and garbage into growth in gardens. And for me, that's the piece. It's like we've got so much of this discard that we're just like, oh, throw that away. And so to bring that back to technology and, biomimicry, how do we shift our current focus from computers, TVs, and automobiles to composting, growing food, water filtration? I know it's already happening, but to really make that more of a priority with the 8 billion minds that we have on this planet to come together to really open source and create some amazing innovations that I think are ready to come out to this world and really ready to make us go, aha. And wow, that was a lot cheaper than we thought it was going to be. Look at that. I think, it's really around that, you're shifting that model of like, okay, how do we shift this thing to our basic needs? And I really think, permaculture has shown me that with the right investment up front, that, food grows itself. Apple trees do apple tree things. They certainly love to be stewarded into better health. But in general, food grows with the right gardening and caretaking, and that if we set ourselves up to make more modular solutions for clean water, clean food, even growing with LED and, solar on a more community level, beyond just community gardens, but like what would it look like to innovate instead of paying $800 for an iPhone to pay $800 for that same hydroponic setup or even aquaponic setup in your home where you're growing your vegetables and your fish. Yeah. The solutions are available. It's a matter of how do we model the sustainability and the regenerativeness of it, which then I think is going to lead to this bigger thing of humanity being able to have the time and bandwidth to actually connect back to nature and do more recreational things that I think are at the heart of what really makes us human. That human touch, that human interaction, and even, where you and I got to meet for the first time at festivals. There's something to be said about the reality that the festival culture actually harkens back to a time when we used to celebrate the harvest or the planting or whatever the season entailed, where we would be up for a few days partying, whatever that equivalent was, not necessarily getting drunk, but just dancing and celebrating the fact that we're alive. And to go back to Martin Prechtel, that's one of his big premises, is that with the more that we're able to fully grieve, not just be sad, not be depressed, but grieve, the other side of that isn't depression. It's actually happiness, joy, and appreciation for life.
Yeah. Well, let's lean into that part of the conversation, because I think, it's easy to be focused on the challenges. It's exciting to be inspired about the work that we can do. And one of these motivations behind this is also to be able to celebrate and enjoy this world. And so, and this connection. And so, we met in the festival world, both volunteering for the Zendo Project. And actually, you're the manager of the Zendo Project.
Come on, I've been volunteering for a long time too.
And this is, and the Zendo Project is a psychedelic harm reduction space that creates spaces for people who are having challenging experiences to get support from their peers. And I think, there's this edge here. We want to go talk about how fun things are, because I think that maybe psychedelics aren't just all about having fun. There's a lot of things going on here. And I think part of why Zendo's there is because as people go into these experiences thinking, I'm going to eat some chemicals and it's going to be a lot of fun and with my run around with my friends and listen to trap music. And then they start remembering things in their life, these grief things that are hard. And they're like, wow, this isn't fun. This is something that is important.
Yeah.
And then they're like out of sync. And then that's oftentimes where they come find us. But I would love for you just like introduce this concept of the Zendo Project. And
Sure.
what are we going? What are we doing here? Why is that happening? Yeah.
So the Zendo Project is a part of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. It was born out of Burning Man, actually, in 2012. And there's a long history of MAPS and their involvement, and other amazing groups and their involvement with psychedelic support at Burning Man specifically, but also other things. And I mean, we've got some of that on our website. We don't need to go too deep into that.
Yeah, I was actually, as you're opening MAPS, can you just mention like what MAPS is?
Yeah,
and, like,
so
just the very sketch of it. Yeah,
absolutely. Really, the big thing that I want to highlight right now, because it's so much of our focus, even though there's a bigger thing. But MAPS was started in '86 by Rick Doblin. And Rick was really excited about the potential of MDMA therapy, especially as it applied to couples, and was really upset that it was made into a Schedule I drug by the, again, this isn't where my history excels, but the reality is over the last 30 years, Rick has done a lot to create a legitimate area of research around MDMA therapy. And right now it's being used here in Boulder and several other sites throughout the world and country to address treatment-resistant PTSD. So these are folks that have had PTSD their whole life, or, since their whatever incident created that. And they have tried everything under the sun, and nothing has made but a tiny dent for most people. And the success of seeing how effective MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is, it gives me hope. I mean, these are people that are coming out that, is 80% roughly, at least in one of the studies I know of, are coming out the other side essentially cured, or not showing up on this CAP scale in the way they were with PTSD. And I mean, that is truly revolutionary. And I think there's so much potential for that. And so that's the deeper mission and vision behind MAPS, is seeing having an open and honest dialogue, obviously, about the reality that, psychedelics aren't necessarily the golden pill, but perhaps under the right set and setting, with the right dose, some of these substances that have been used, some of them mushrooms and ayahuasca and peyote, for probably thousands, if not more years, do have the ability to create some deep psychological and emotional healing within humanity.
Right. And so so it's Schedule I, saying they're no medicinal use.
Right.
And then now, after decades of work, they've gotten so the FDA is like a legitimate government research happening on it right now, or the legitimate government approved research, FDA approved research. And it's actually getting fast tracked. I mean, they're like, this is urgent because it's so effective, and it's the only thing that's working right now. So, it's still Schedule I, but once this gets passed, who knows? But I just, capturing that arc, I really appreciate that, right? Because there's even if there's something challenging here, the fact that it has medicinal uses that seem to be working is definitely merits.
Definitely merits,
right.
And so then to swing it back to the Zendo Project, we see the other side of that, which is people going to festivals and other concerts and events, and just going for it. And, the reality is that there isn't a whole lot of drug education. My drug education as a kid was just say no. I was, growing up in the height of the Nancy Reagan, just don't do it. Just abstinence from everything, and
I was there.
And it worked actually for me. I'll be honest. Like the idea of taking something like LSD or any other psychedelic that was going to make me crazy scared the crap out of me. I didn't want to do it. Like my mind was all I knew, and that was all I had, and I wanted to keep that going. And so what we do with Zendo Project is we provide a safe space and peer support. Again, a lot of these folks are psychiatrists, therapists, doctors, nurses, who have a deeper arc, but when they're coming to this place, they hang their professional hat on the hook at the door and come in just to be peer support. To, again, back to this place of reinforcing that I think the innate ability of humans is to heal themselves. And so we're just helping folks to have their process to go where and do what they need to feel complete with their own emotional release and integration.
Right. Yeah, my sense is like very often the person's coming, and the whole thing that the sitter, the volunteer that's working there is doing is almost just letting that person know that you're safe,
right?
That whatever experience you're going through is okay, and that I see you, and this is going to, and whatever's hard here is it probably okay to look at?
Yeah.
And just letting that person see that. And I remember just loving that transformative experience when a person realizes that you're just going to love them and care for them.
Yeah.
And some people, you realize that they've never had someone do that.
Not
for
a
them.
single person in the world. Yeah.
And so to have someone just like looking non-judgmentally sit with you, that already becomes a healing experience. Yeah. But the volunteers aren't teaching them anything.
Right.
They're not doing anything. They're letting that person's own healing experience happen.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that's like the holding the space for that. Right.
Yeah. It's powerful. Right. And I mean, yeah, it's testament to just what's going on in this world, where the first time some of these people are ever receiving this treatment of being unconditionally accepted is by a stranger. In the depth of their most psychedelic challenge, to just look up and to see the genuine, loving and accepting eyes of the human across from them, being like, yeah, what you're going through is absolutely crazy, no doubt, but I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. It's really powerful. Actually, I'm curious, would you be willing to touch on the 4 principles?
Yeah. So
everyone listen here. This is useful for everyone in all contexts. It's good stuff. Yeah.
Right. So at the core of the Zendo Project, our 4 principles of psychedelic peer support are safe space, sitting not guiding, talking through not down, and difficult is not the same as bad. And again, the way that we talk about this at all the trainings is, this is an open source approach. We've taken this from years of psychedelic therapy research, in integrating and incorporating a lot of indigenous wisdom as it applies to traditional medicines like peyote and ayahuasca and mushrooms, and really just having that feedback from volunteers of like, hey, how did those 4 principles go? Is there something we need to modify or flip one of them on their head? And so far, it seems like those are it. And I don't want to say it like they're definite, but they seem to be working really well. I mean, I've seen that in my own experience. I've seen that with other volunteers. They're a great framework. Yeah. And a great structure that we can then go into more detail about what that looks like. Because for some people, the way safe space looks to one looks different to another. But, that big piece of sitting, not guiding, I think is pretty much at that core of what we've been talking about, of humans being able to help and heal themselves when given the opportunity, when feeling safe enough that can actually happen. Because as we've seen in this culture, I think you and I both, there's not a lot of bandwidth for being emotional or being weird or being different. And sometimes that piece, I'll just speak back to my own adolescence of coming from Saudi Arabia, where elementary school was just getting along with folks. My time in Saudi Arabia was really getting along with folks from all over the world. And then coming back to an adolescence in Las Vegas, where it was like, man, if I wasn't wearing the right clothes or doing the right skateboard brand or whatever it was, I was outcast. And I realized I had to play the conformity game real quick, just to allow my emotional state to feel accepted. And there was a lot of conflict within that didn't really come to full fruition until I became a young adult, to be more in my own truth than what I was perceiving people wanted me to be.
Right. Because, it's almost like society is constantly pulling us away from ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, don't you want to be this? You want to compete this? Do you want to be worthy enough? Do you want to be good enough? Yeah, that worthy, unworthy cycle is really intense. I've been working on a lot in my life, and, I've realized like it's actually just a lie. There's no absolute measure of worthiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your quality is measured by who you are right now. And, so it's like in that way where we're just trying to figure out how to be in the world all the time. It's like very rare that we actually get a sense to actually just be with ourselves. Yes. Right. And actually like look into what's going on. And, I've been, God, I was just listening to the interview between Michael Pollan and Tim Ferriss.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah. But for those who don't know, Michael Pollan is a wonderful journalist and author who's been writing about a human's relationship with nature. He's been doing a lot about food for the last while. And he recently just wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind. And it's about the renaissance of research around psychedelics. But one of the things that he reminded me of is that one of the things that psychedelics are doing is it turns off the part of someone's brain that is called the default mode network, the part that is sort of giving you a sense of your personality, a sense of sort of what's going on, am I good enough, am I worthy, do people like my shoes? You know, that voice
Sure.
takes that away. And then people are just looking at their unfiltered emotions, their unfiltered experiences. And oftentimes people are surprised what they find because there's stuff that they're remembering from a long time ago or something. And this, I think, is really interesting because I think it points to the fact that when people were having bad trips, it's not some external thing that's going into people's minds. Oftentimes it's people facing something old and hard.
And something, again, this is, I think there's a piece of this that we're, I'll say that even though I was brought up Christian, it wasn't overly religious, but I think especially in, the United States, there is this, there's this programming in this paradigm that this thing is sin, that it's the devil living inside of me, and any of these parts are atrocious and shouldn't be allowed. Whereas, I think in that psychedelic state, a lot of it is just accessing, the collective unconscious. Mm-hmm. And we get to see these parts of ourselves that haven't been allowed. And the core of psychedelic means mind manifesting. Mm-hmm. So we're taking the unconscious and we're making it conscious. We're taking the unseen and we're bringing it into light. And so, of course, there's going to be some scary things to look at. But I don't think in this culture we really give ourselves the ability and the bandwidth to say that that's okay. It's okay to have, the devil and God living inside of you. And they're both tenants in your castle, mm-hmm, right? They're there to have arguments and to not always get along, but it doesn't make you God and it doesn't make you the devil to have these internal dialogues between the two happening inside your head.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. We all have shadow in ourselves, and it's not like we don't get rid of it by suppressing it. We get rid of it by witnessing it, and oftentimes I find that the shadow is the part we have in common with people the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
The part of ourselves we're trying to keep secret tend to be the things that everyone else is keeping secret from each other.
Yeah, and if I may,
go for it.
One of the pieces that has been really powerful for me in coming into adulthood has been this group called the Mankind Project. There's a lot of different men's work out there. These guys were kind of started by at least the foundation of Robert Bly, his book Iron John, which is a really powerful read, around the concept that once we went into more of an industrial age, we stopped the apprenticeship and the mentoring that happened not only with our father but our uncles. Just having a network of what it looked like to be a man, what it looked like to be responsible, and you have a trade or to talk in a way that was like, this is how we talk as men when the women are around, and this is how we treat women and with respect and dignity and all these things. And whether or not that's outdated or outmoded is another thing. But the reality is this movement of men's work, and specifically what I saw with the Mankind Project and doing this powerful initiation weekend, was that there's a lot of shadow out there that I had no idea about. Mm-hmm. And when I got to just witness what some of these men had gone through, their childhood trauma or any sort of abuse or things like that, it was so eye-opening, not just to the kind of the tragedy of it all, but it was really powerful to see that when that man did some work, it affected all of us. It helped heal a thread inside of us that maybe we didn't even know was alive. And that piece of work, and again, beyond men's work, just human work, being able to have a safe container where, the way I like to put it is it's an arena where we get to wrestle with our shadow and then realize that shadow is actually not a demon, but a friend waiting to be put into service. Mm-hmm. And the shadows, that's how they work. When they don't have something to do, they get bored and they start creating a lot of chaos in our lives.
Yeah. I would think like they're acting out, trying to get your attention. Yeah. And when you ignore them, they freak out.
Totally.
And right. So VA Brother, Mankind Project, I'm just going to put a double shout out for this. I like to say about the Mankind Project, it's worth going to do this if you're a man and you have parents, or don't.
Exactly. Exactly.
And by the way, their definition of men is totally wide open. That can be transgender in either direction, whatever your identity is. There's some space for you there, just to make point of that. So I love that. Thanks for bringing that in, because it does remind us, like, when we can see other people healing, that's all also part of our own healing, right? And I also heard this thing recently that was so powerful. it's like when we're doing the healing work that we're doing now, and I think that between like the different kinds of ceremonial settings and the journey work, which is also psychotherapy is like really going really well these days.
Yeah.
The healing that we get to do these days for us is also the healing for our parents.
Yeah.
And our grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
And our great-grandparents.
Yeah, it's ancestral,
because
right?
a lot of these things we're carrying are theirs.
Yeah.
And they never had a chance to do this. I mean, our great-grandparents, you know, growing up in a culture where they don't get to even stray outside of their gender roles, their class roles, their whatever, you know, like the ability to heal or grow or question anything is not really available. And so that work we get to do for ourselves gets to be passed on, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're seeing scientifically that that's true. I mean, the epigenetics of looking back at the way that stuff gets imprinted into the DNA is no longer this like, oh, it doesn't matter, or like that's some new age concept. It's actually now being empirically shown that whatever trauma our ancestors have are still living in our DNA. And, you know, I think the piece that maybe we don't know quite how to measure yet, but I've seen from the people I've known or experienced myself and being down in Peru and doing ayahuasca is there's some deeper healing and reconfiguration of that trauma if we give it the proper attention and alchemy to feel it. You know, and I think that's the piece, is that there isn't that proper... there isn't that proper relationship with death. I mean, we don't talk about it in this culture. We don't talk about either the existential what's next or the fact that like, hey, we're here today and we're having a conversation, but you know, in the next 50 years or 100 years, maybe neither of us are going to be here in these same bodies, and have going to gone on to another journey. And man, isn't it a wonderful thing that we can sit here and have this conversation and look into each other's eyes and be alive? I mean, just that's that piece, you know, two sides of the same coin, the grief and praise that Martine talks about. And I think is so powerful to remind us that if we really address not just our personal stuff, but the bigger collective of what got passed down to us, the trauma of, you know, at least my grandparents being in World War II and, you know, their parents probably being in World War I, and all of the things that have continued to be passed down because it hasn't been healed. It's waiting for us. It's waiting. It's not going anywhere. If we don't do anything about it, we're passing it down to the next generation. So I think that's what a lot of us are seeing with whether we're calling it a psychedelic evolution or renaissance, or even just a deeper connection to nature, is this thing that we're like, okay, let's take some responsibility. Buck stops here. It stops with me. I'm going to make a better future for this planet than was handed to me. And it's not to put this, you know, I'm not upset with my ancestry. I'm not pissed off that my parents didn't do this thing. I think I was raised as well as anybody knew how in that day and age. But I think we're also waking up to like, what have we done? I mean, really see the tragedy of that when I look at kids that are just being born into this world of, I didn't have a thing when I was in elementary school or high school that was like, hey, the world's going to end because of there's too much plastic. There's too much, you know, degradation of the atmosphere and global warming and all of this thing. And I mean, for me, it's the faith that we're going to do something awesome.
Yeah.
There's going to be this miracle that we're able to pull, this innovation that we can do collectively. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
You know, I don't always see it in my day to day, but it is what feeds my heart, is this deeper knowing that I've felt in the psychedelic state that the universe is basically benign. It's not here to get me. It's not here to punish me in this Old Testament sort of version of God of I will smite you. But it's this like cradling of like, hey, I love you. And sometimes I might have to slap you upside the head pretty hard because you're just not paying attention. But you're here to do good work, kid. And I want to support you in that journey. Yeah.
Well, I think what's really interesting is like thinking about this generational trick is like, right, we have a generational healing we have to do. And for our whole planet, and that's a little bit about how we deal with the environment and so many things, but it's also saying the buck stops here, playing out the traumas we've been passed on, you know, like in my life, in my world, like addiction has been something that's been in my family in all sorts of different directions. And I because just every direct all the way back my family tree, and I assume that goes back further than people I know, you know, and it's like, this is my task in this generation, is to stop this. Like, this is not getting passed on. And part of that is I like have to face reality. I have to face myself. I have to actually be with who I really am, because it's the pain of like not being authentic that is actually the thing that creates that kind of suffering.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hi, friends. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Pardon the interruption. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends, and come visit fractalfriends.us to get more information about each show and the guests. You can also sign up for my newsletter there. And in the newsletter, I share information about the podcast and what's going on with Fractal Friends. But I also talk about my other work as a conflict transformation educator and catalyst. You see, conflict's an inherent feature of living in this diverse world, and it doesn't have to be painful. In fact, conflict can really be an opportunity to build more intimate relationships. There are ways that we can not just coexist with each other, but we can actually learn to thrive with one another. And this is not a fantasy. We already have the tools to make these kinds of changes, and I'm committed to sharing them with the world. And so, in addition to this podcast, I give talks, I teach workshops, I give personal coaching, and I work with organizations to create custom trainings. And I work with companies and communities who really are trying to transform their important and difficult conversations into positive engines for growth. My work is generally based on the understanding that conflict is a fractal, and I use examples from natural systems to teach people how to create truly inclusive systems, how to manage chronic conflict, how to effectively communicate their ideas, and the transformative skills of just learning to listen. If you'd like to learn more about my work, or if you would like to sign up for a free half-hour consultation about a conflict that you'd like to transform, or ways that you would like to transform your skills around conflict, you're welcome to visit DuncanAutry.com. Oh yeah, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, and also thank you for listening to the ad that I made for myself in the middle of my show. And so, with no further ado, let's go back to the conversation with Ryan Beauregard. I would love to talk just like, because it's just so, we're talking about psychedelics and all the pros and cons here. So there's this range we have of people sort of, not necessarily intentionally getting themselves into a strong experience because they took more than they wanted or weren't really paying attention.
Right, it's just bad setting. It just their mindset wasn't right, or the group of friends they were hanging out
something didn't work out, and so then we're catching them at Zendo and by the way, really just want to put a call out to like all different kinds of harm reduction spaces. People who are just being support, pure support. That's great. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's people who are like intentionally working with psychedelic therapists and healing and that's of course like we're talking about in MAPS. We have like this whole range here. Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering, like, I'm trying to think of like some examples or some stories maybe we can come up with, or like what does this look like? What do we really mean?
Yeah. Well, what I'll share with you is an experience I have with. I got to be a night attendant for the phase 2 MDMA PTSD Boulder study, which means that between the end of their MDMA session, which usually happened somewhere between 5 and 6 p.m., and when they saw the therapist the next day at 8 a.m., they needed somebody, non-therapist, just somebody to sit with, be available, really. Just bring them dinner, bring them, just be a space and a person that if something came up, I was able to call the therapists or, make whatever relay to get more help or support in that space. And both of the young men that I was able to be a night attendant for were medics. Well, I think one was an Army medic, the other was a Marine medic. And what was tragic, what was both beautiful and tragic? The beautiful piece was they had been trying so many other forms of PTSD therapy with no results at all. And this, just both the grief they had as well as the appreciation that this had done something and they could feel it was beautiful.
Like already in one session.
Yeah, in one session.
Yeah.
And the other tragic piece of this, and this is, I just bring this up from a place of our deeper cultural healing and programming and paradigm shift that I think is really important to be able to create a more inclusive approach, is that the feedback I got was, especially from one of them, that as a Marine especially, and I'm not saying this applies to all Marines, I'm just saying this was the story he shared with me. as somebody in the military, and especially a Marine, to admit that you have PTSD was a big no-no. It was like saying that you were already defeated, but to go seek treatment for PTSD was exclusionary. It was like you were exiled. You were no longer a part of the platoon because and I'm not saying this is official. I'm just saying this is the way that we can sometimes, as peers, really discourage and negatively influence and impact the people in our lives by sticking to a paradigm that's not necessarily working, to be like, I'm going to be so tough and I'm going to pull myself up by my own bootstraps and I'll be okay and I don't need anybody outside of myself because I'm tough. And as I've been shown it through the men's work and just life, I think true courage is vulnerability.
Right.
I think true healing comes from that ability to admit that you don't know and to then take the next steps to figure out, like, how do I make progress? How do I heal this thing that is so debilitating and so beyond my control?
Right.
And how do I get it under control on some level?
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely. And I want to ask you a question. I'm pretty sure you can answer this one, but we're imagining, so here's this medic putting together bodies, helping people die. Yeah. Intense situation, watching people get blown up, who knows what.
Yeah.
Intense. Medics right in it.
Yeah.
And then in a culture where, let's man up and we don't need to help. But he does find the courage to go ask for help, even though for at least him, this is risking exiling from the group.
Yeah. His family, is as close as, deeper than any family.
Yeah.
I've seen those
bonds. The family that's been there.
And I've heard it put this way. It's like, we're not over here supporting a cause. We're over here supporting our brothers and sisters in this thing because their life is the most important and paramount thing. And of course they've got an assignment, so that's what they're protecting each other within. But their bigger thing is like, I've got the man on my left and I've got the man on my right. And that piece, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so now how do we, in the ways of, the movie and the book, Men Who Stare at Goats, how do we transform this amazing network of people that really truly want to be of service into perhaps more of a peacekeeping, real like warrior versus a soldier, where people are actually making a positive impact through regenerative technology. I think of like how different would it look if the U.S. was planting gardens and creating water filtration, where then it's just like, well, it's really hard to get mad at those folks, but it's pretty easy when we're the big bullies on the block, just lobbing bombs and missiles everywhere. And I get that there's a bigger idealism behind it. I'm not trying to like put it down.
No, I hear you.
We got to stand up for folks that are not doing good things to other people in the world. But at what point do we become the aggressor and, the terror just by the way that we are conducting ourselves in the world? And I think that certainly could be repaired.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to come back to the question I was going to ask, but I do want to just say something about this because this is one of my favorite topics, is someone who's kind of obsessed with conflict resolution and peace in this world. The goal of the military, and so often, is like, we're going to go and help these people. Like there's a reason of service that the military is going. And so like, if the message is we're going to get rid of this dictator, we're going to bring democracy, we're going to get rid of the Taliban, like there's some real positive thing. But the thing we keep missing in these conversations is like, that's a process that's going to require a follow through.
Right.
It's not just about stopping the bad guy, but then spending maybe 2 or 3 times as much energy and time on the rebuilding. Right? Like what is the positive thing we're bringing? And if we're sending like soldiers to stop the bad guys, but then not the teachers and the therapists and or just even getting those soldiers, teaching them how to rebuild, or the agriculturalists, whoever it is, and it's just like, and that's just a short-sightedness that I think undermines the capacity of the military to really do what it's best at trying to do, And it has enough resources that it totally can do this.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that, and then we'll switch off topic. But the reality that I've seen in my life is the more aggressive that people are, the less peace exists around them. And people often are not trying to go around and protect and help an aggressive person. They're trying to distance themselves and always keep an eye on that. And so if we can actually take this from a more peacekeeping place of like, how do we actually assert ourselves again as as this amazing superpower that's giving food and technology and actually helping to improve the quality of life, first by doing it at home, showing that like we can take care of our homeless and our starvation problems and our technology and our waste disposal
democracy
in a way that people can look at as admirable. And I think that that's the thing. Like, we've been on this high horse. There's a great book, and the name is eluding me, and I apologize to the author right now for that, but it's called Sacred America, Sacred World. And he talks a lot about how do we address, I mean, the atrocities really of like how we founded our nation are not very admirable. I mean, we came in and we're, you know, of course we had this taxation thing, and we're like, all right, up yours, Britain. We're a sovereign nation now. We're not going to do that anymore. But the reality of what we did to an indigenous people here, and then what we did again to the Japanese with internment camps in the fort. I mean, there's a lot of shadow as slavery, a country. I mean, not to even touch slavery, which is, I mean, there's a lot. And so if we can start addressing that grief, I think we're going to do something better with the future. But if we're looking at it from a place of like, oh, well, this person, you know, they hit me in the face, so I'm going to have to hit him back. Right. You know, it just keeps escalating, and that's really not creating peace. And it's not creating a better world. It's actually creating more terror. You know, people are afraid, and I think we've got enough of that. And for a while, I think, you know, people were playing off of that. But the reality is, like, conspiracy or not, whether people are big into that or not, like, the reality is, like, we're all humans. Like, if people, I think, just got born into this weird lottery system where they're like, hey, I've got all this money and power, and I don't want to lose it, so I'm going to keep doing this thing. But ultimately, it's not safe to be the person with all the toys and all the gold, you know, like, because people are they're going to keep coming after you. So how do we find a way to distribute that, you know, without being communist and all these other, you know, experiments that really didn't work in some ways or another? How do we find that balance as humanity to have a more open source approach to how we play things like conflict resolution? And my thought is like, gosh, what does it look like to get some world leaders together that are really in conflict and sit down for a mediated ayahuasca session? Are they coming out the other side of that thing, right?
No, here's the thread. I think we can pull all the themes together right here.
I have faith you can.
Okay, so like world, you know, U.S. alone, a lot of hard history, and that's what got us to where we are, right? Like it is who we are. It is ourselves. We don't get to walk away from our past,
right?
And in fact, if we're going to try to step into the future, we're actually going to need to embrace the parts of our past that are really amazing, because the U.S. is the first democracy. Like it really like big invention there, and like and you know, representative democracy is like not really working out for the world as much as it used to, and we have to upgrade. But in order to go forward, we have to keep on bringing in the past. But we can't just suppress the past. We can't suppress the trauma of slavery. We can't suppress the trauma of indigenous genocide. We can't suppress the trauma of, you know, what we've done to the environment, and we can't suppress the, you know, we can't just ignore it.
Right.
We actually have to look at it.
Yeah.
But looking at it is hard.
Oh, it's painful.
And it's painful. And so we don't like doing that.
No, it's so uncomfortable, isn't it?
And so the question I wanted to ask you is, when that soldier comes into this space, and he is having a positive experience, despite all the risk it took and all the risk of isolation that it took him to do this, can you explain what that mechanism that's happening to him with MDMA? And I think that this is like, it makes me feel like, what does the MDMA assisted psychotherapy for America look like?
Right.
But talk about what happens with the soldier. Like, what is the neuroscience behind it a little bit?
There's an interesting thing that happens, and I don't have, you know, somebody much more intelligent and chemically, neurologically based than I can give you the details. But what I will say is this: MDMA shuts down the fear sector part of the brain, so that association of for PTSD specifically, of like, let's say it's a loud noise, right? So it's fireworks, or it's being in a movie theater where I'm sitting in the back because I don't trust who's coming in and out of the door because of my experience. I know I have to have my back covered, so I'm always going to be in the back of the movie theater, whatever that thing is. PTSD, as I understand it, creates that throwback to the memory being right now. There's no like, this is a memory, this happened some other time and you're safe now. It is, I am under threat right now. This thing that is triggering me, the stimulus equals PTSD is now my whole like safety and well-being is being threatened.
Yeah.
And what happens with the MDMA is it floods the brain with a combination of different neurotransmitters and shuts down others in a way where somebody is able to re-examine that intersection of neural pathways and really focus on this place that is more objective and less fear-based. So they can actually look at the specific instance or instances that created this PTSD and see it from, kind of a bird's eye, to see it and be like, oh, this is what happened and this is where I was. And this isn't happening right now. And I am in a safe space right now, being able to talk about this possibly for the first time ever in my life. I mean, that's huge. And I think that piece is so key to our ability to heal it, is to be able to be in the emotion, have it come up, but realize that what happened in the past is not happening right now.
Right.
Because I think that's how things perpetuate. Is I was traumatized, and then here's this other source of stimulus that feels traumatic, therefore I'm continuing to be re-traumatized.
Right.
And I think a lot of it too is, I think some of these people in the past have done MDMA. It's not that this is the first time they've ever done MDMA, but they're doing it in a context where they've got a skillful guidance to remind them what's going on inside and to help bring them to presence and to help address these bigger concepts that are coming up around, whether it was child abuse or war or any of these other things that can cause trauma in our lives.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because I think because if I understand then, because part of the reason why PTSD tends not to be treatable is because common cognitive behavioral therapy, let's talk through it, is impossible because people can't talk about their experience without reliving it, and then the trauma shuts them down. And so in this case, they're able to talk about it while still feel safe, but it's not like they're having a good experience. They're crying their mind off, right? I mean, they're having this very powerful experience, but at least and then that experience is starting to help them separate from the thing, right? Like, I am this experience.
Right.
That is something that happened to me.
Right.
And it was a legitimately horrible thing, and being able to, and so going back to how do we heal this world and what do we step into the future looks like, it's like we don't get to ignore our past, but we also don't need to just take it and bring it up and try to force it in people's faces because they're not going to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
If we need to find the spaces to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And recognizing that they will be hard and there will be tears and there will be legitimate anger.
Right.
But how can we hold it enough so then we can start recognizing that us in 2018, we get to be separate than that. We're still impacted by that history, but now we're separate than it. And upcoming episodes, I'm excited to talk to some people who specifically work with these kinds of themes about how do we talk about race and how do we talk about our history and how do we talk about immigration, without across these differences. And so, just really appreciating that. And
just to hit on this, I think this is a concept that is both brought to us through, nature immersion and nature connection, as well as psychedelic states, is this reality that there's no more us and them. Like that whole idea that it's like, oh, it's Trump. Yeah. Or it's North Korea, or it's Putin, or whatever that is. That it's some country or it's some person that's making it bad. When the reality is well, that's just a person that I got a flavor in that. I don't love that flavor that I have within me, but maybe if I concentrate more on healing it within myself than saying it's outside of me and out of my control, which is really a hard thing to do, especially in the paradigm of the devil's out there. I don't need to be influenced by it. Rather than a more holistic approach to be oh, I am the devil and I am God and I am Jesus and I am Buddha and I am all these other things, but I'm also ultimately my guru rather than looking to somebody else. But it also means that we're all gurus. We're all Jesus. We're all Buddha, not just one of us. And we all do it in a different way. And isn't that a wonderful thing that some of us do this thing really well? Some of us are cooks and artists and musicians. And to be able to find that, I think, is really what I've been hearing more and more, not just in the folks that are coming into the Zendo, but the conversations I'm having with our volunteers and other folks at these psychedelic conferences and other events that we attend, is there's a lot of people that are feeling just that they're not on task. They're not really doing the deeper work that they're here to in terms of their life purpose. They're not feeling fulfilled in their engagement with life. And I would say that is at the core of, the disapproval with just things happening around them, the disapproval with themselves, is that they, on some level, I think, really believe that they're here for a bigger thing than just going and doing a job every day and consuming and buying the new iPhone or like watching the new movie, that they're really here to make a bigger impact in the world. And I think that that's part of this renaissance that is coming is we're here encouraging each other. Like, you can do it, man. When you forget, please call me up so that I can remind you. And I'm certainly going to forget. So I need you to remind me because I can't do this alone.
Right.
There is the we. We have to come back to the we, and we can't start pointing fingers. It's like, oh, I could do it if it weren't for that guy or if it weren't for that group of people. It's an easy out. And I think it takes really a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of work to say, this is me.
Yeah.
That part of that person that I don't like is essentially the part of myself I don't like.
Well, it's like, this is me. This is me, but the most authentic me I can be. And how many barriers can I get out of the way to that expression? And all of this around me is also me, right? All these other groups, this, whether that's a different political party or different race, different religion, different country, like that is an illusion. Yeah. And similarly, the separation from the planet is that this is an illusion. And what's cool is, I heard Michael Pollan say this, that's one of the reasons why he's very excited about this psychedelics right now, is because it touches on all three of those things. It's helping people heal. It's helping people get past tribalism. It's helping people get more in touch with nature. And these seem to be the things people are really needing right now. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Ryan, we're kind of in the wrapping up stage.
Sure.
One question I love to ask is, like, given all of your life experience, what would you invite people to pay attention to as they're trying to grow and make a better world?
Yeah, that's a great one, Duncan. Thank you. I mean, there's so many answers to that. And I think the one that I'm really coming to right now as I dig deep is presence, really being aware of what's coming up right now. I think it's so easy to look at, well, this was from the past, or this is what I've got to do in the future. And I think a call to presence is really a beautiful thing, because it is showing us what's still alive, and I think a deeper allowance to really, this is fun, because I got to hang out with Matthew Silver a few weeks ago, and like that ability to be weird without being on a drug is something I think he's mastered really well. Just the ability to encourage, like, hey, let's be here now, and let's be a little bit weird, and let's be a little bit whatever that is the reminder that our specific vibration or flavor or passion or preference is really pointing to our deepest gift on this planet. And if we're looking at that beyond just like the immediate gratification of like, oh, I need this food, or I need this drug, or I need this sexual experience, but looking at it as like, oh, I'm an artist when it comes to food, or I'm an artist when it comes to conversation, or any of these other things, to really dig deep into how we can best do that, and more so how we can do that to be of service. Because I think we're seeing that this idea, especially, as this mankind and like this idea of men is popular. David Data talks a lot about this. I got to fix it. I got to fix this thing around me, rather than just allowing it to be, and holding the structure that allows the storm, as it applies to masculine, feminine. Again, to not get into this, gender binary stuff, but I really like, yin and yang. There's the full spectrum and there's the full gradient between each. But this idea that if we can really hold the structure for this thing to play out, it's going to be much different than if we're trying to resist it. Like, you can't stop the storm. The storm's going to come. If you're trying to like hold up a plywood sheet to make the storm stop, forget about it. But if we're allowing it to play itself out in a way that's I don't want to say non-destructive, but that isn't causing harm, then I think we're really getting into a place where we're allowing, maybe for the first time in history, and I don't really think that's true, because I think in our indigenous roots, we used to do this regularly. That would be festivals, that would be our medicine men, but
every culture except for the Inuits.
Yeah, except for the Inuit, right? That we have this ability to really be magnificent and to be human. Yeah. I think that's a piece that Martine Prechtel really hits on well. Is like, if we could be fully human again, this world would be amazing. And that involves being connected to this unseen thing, this thing that we don't know how to define, but from our scientific minds, we often, I'll speak for myself, try to figure out of what is this pattern I'm being shown, or how do I empirically prove this in a laboratory to be like, well, it's not to say that you shouldn't go after it if that's your life passion, but some things, like, it's called the great mystery for a reason. Like figure out the things you can figure out and let some of it be a deeper, I don't know, a deeper journey into the unknown is a beautiful piece of how we play this game. And I don't know, man, I'll say this, there's a humility that I'm trying to embrace more. And I really see, I'll say this, I think this is at the core of it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of amazing individual work we can do. We can do therapy. We can choose to do psychedelics with a guide or a therapist, or go down to Peru and do some ayahuasca. Awesome. Good on you. You're going to figure out some amazing things about yourself. But the next step is about community. It's really about bringing this in with the folks that we want to be around with, as well as the folks that we kind of can't stand, and learning how to make better relationship within ourselves to all of those people, how we show up, and ask people to hold us accountable to those things that we really want to be in this world.
Yeah.
And I've seen, for me, it's hard to do when I'm just isolated.
Yeah.
I really need the people that I love to call me out and be like, hey, you're being kind of a jerk right now. Like, I'm not saying I don't love you, but like, how about this? How about this? And I still love you even though you're being a jerk, but I just want to let you know you're being a jerk right now. I'm like, oh, thanks. I needed that reflection so I could chill out a little bit.
Yeah, because the true friendship and community is the ones who can tell you you're off base and still hold you, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold accountable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just love the way you're talking about them being the presence and the mystery, and you kind of pull those together. And it reminds me that sort of the last part of that Alan Watts quote that I was talking about at the very beginning, where he talks about how we have to realize we're part of nature. And he's like, so here's the deal. Yeah. Here's the deal. Like, we can't fix nature.
Right.
We can't straighten out a wiggly world.
Right.
We can't transform ourselves because our ego can't change our ego. So what do we do? And then he says, what happens if you're just patient and observant? And just be here for a minute. And you start noticing the world's going on around you.
Yeah.
The wind's blowing, your heart's beating, stars are moving. That's you.
Yeah.
That's you. You're doing it right now. You are what's happening. And then from there, now figure out what to do.
Yeah. Human beings rather than human doings.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we find you? How do we find your projects and Zendo Project and things?
So,
and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Zendoproject.org, maps.org as well are the psychedelic support and psychedelic research websites. And then I'm We Share Earth, WeShareEarth.com. It's a nonprofit. We're accepting donations. The bigger piece that I've realized as I've looked at it is we're really looking to help distribute models for a better world. And we go off a lot of the Wilderness Awareness School around the 8 Shields model. You know, I've simplified it into 4, but the idea that 4 directions can really be a beautiful template as we look at this world and we go forward and we look at our growth and how to implement these exciting ideas into reality. And I think there's just, I'll say this, with We Share Earth, I'm integrating and incorporating a lot of the amazing indigenous wisdom and the accelerated U.S. cultural wisdom that has come from folks that have made the bridges between the more indigenous and the more modern teachings. And I want to pay a lot of homage to those folks. I wouldn't be here without them. And it's again, a lot of that's on the website, so I'm not going to go off on it here. But there's that movement, and for me, it's all about community. It's about making this world better beyond what I think it needs to look like, and beyond what my ego thinks I need to say or do, to encourage all of us to show up in the way that's really creating a world that transforms grief and garbage into growth and gardens. And I have a deeper faith that that's why we all showed up in this round. I don't know if I really believe in reincarnation at times, but it seems like this round we're here for some big work.
Yeah.
And when I look at you and what I've seen in you and the way you show up in this world, like we're doing it and we're reminding each other how to do it better. So thank you for the wisdom and the presence and the reminders you bring to this world, both to me directly and to this community at large. I'm really inspired and honored to know you, Duncan.
Oh, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Yeah, I like to think like we all win or we all lose.
Yeah.
And this time in history, we actually are aware of what's going on more than we've ever been, like, so yeah, we can do something really awesome right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the opportunity.
Oh man, thank you so much. I've loved the way this conversation went. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll do it again sometime in the future. Who knows?
Yes.
All right, Duncan.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Fractal Friends. If you want to find more information about this episode and all the things that we talk about, the Zendo Project, about maps, about We Share Earth, come on down to fractalfriends.us. That's the website, and you can find all the links there. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And remember, we all have a role to play in the whole. And speaking of our role in the whole, I have some really great music to share with you. To celebrate the themes that have come up in this podcast, I'm going to play 2 songs for you by Cello Joe. They are called Change the World and Get Freaky. Cello Joe is the wildest beatboxing cellist in the West, and he's also a passionate advocate for helping make a better world for all of us. All of the sounds you're about to hear are sounds that he's making with a cello and his own mouth, and he loops it all together. He's just one performer. So this is really cool music. You can find Cello Joe at cellojoe.com. He's also on Spotify and iTunes and Facebook. And again, all the links to him and his music you're going to find at the Fractal Friends website. This episode reminds me of my favorite quote by E.B. White. And it goes like this. I get up every morning determined to both change the world and have one hell of a good time. And sometimes this makes planning my day difficult. Well, today we're not going to choose between the two. We're going to play both. And so again, I hope you enjoy these songs by Cello Joe. Both are from his newest album called So Much Love. And again, the first song is called Get Freaky, and the second one is called Change the World. Put your dancing shoes on, because here we go.
Like a dancing junkie, get freaky, I get funky. It don't matter if you're fit or a little bit chunky. Get freaky, I get funky. Everybody move around just like a monkey. Get freaky, I get funky. Ha ha ha, ho ho ha ha. Like a dancing junkie, get freaky, I get funky. It don't matter if you're fit or a little bit chunky. Get freaky, I get funky. Everybody move around just like a monkey. Get freaky, I get funky. Ha ha ha, ho ho ha ha ha. get funky, ha ha. I get freaky, I get funky, ha ha. I get freaky, I get funky, ha 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 ha. I get freaky, I get funky, yeah. I get freaky, I get funky, ha ha. Bring it back. Let's go. Get freaky, I get funky. So addicted to the music like a dancing junkie. Get freaky, I get funky. It don't matter if you're fit or a little bit chunky. Get freaky, I get funky. Everybody move around just like a monkey. Get freaky, I get funky. Ah ha ha. Ha ha. If not now, then when? If not us, then who? If not now, then when? If not us, then who? We are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world. There is no them, there's only us. There's no they, there's you and me. There is no them, there's only us. There is no they, it's you and me. And we are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world. not now, then when? If not us, then who? If not now, then when? We are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world. We are the ones that'll change the world.